Welcome to Faith Works Live. Here's your host, Rebecca Haynie.
Hello, welcome. It's my joy to be with you here, just friends gathered around the table, talking about issues of temporal and eternal significance. That's what we do here on Faith Works Live. What does it look like to live out our faith? What are the elements of our worldview? Why do we believe what we believe? And how do we live that out? Here in particular, in our First in the Nation caucus state, it's that time of year. And we are virtually tripping over presidential candidates as we speak. But, hey, it's a dirty job. Somebody's got to do it. Here it's a perfect opportunity, actually, to address major issues of import. And one of those issues that I think maybe hasn't taken primary place in our thoughts and discussions lately, but definitely should, is the issue of immigration, particularly border security and what's happening at our southern border as we speak. The crisis, that word gets thrown around a lot, particularly in politics, but this is truly, if it ever applies, it certainly does now. There is an immigration crisis that has been going on largely unchecked for the last, at least the last decade, and things have reached and I would say have broken over that boiling point. This has to be addressed right now. And what's the situation? What are the details? And how can we address this from a logical, legal, and morally consistent perspective, constitutional perspective, ideally? I have an expert with us who is going to lend her insights. I'm very excited to learn myself from Lora Ries. She is with the Heritage Foundation. Of course, their whole team is never less than excellent. She's the director of the Border Security and Immigration Center at the Heritage Foundation. She has many years of experience in immigration and homeland security. She's worked at the legislative branch as counsel for the U.S. House of Representatives Judiciary Subcommittee on Immigration and Claims. So she is the perfect person to educate us on the reality of the crisis on our border as we speak, and give us some ideas about how to address it well. Lora, it's so great to have you on the show.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. It's something that, as I said, I think it's almost taken a back burner position in our political discussions. I don't know why. Maybe there are some other flashy or crazy issues that are taking its place. But can you give us an update? Just remind us. I used the word crisis, and I truly think that's accurate. And why this is impacting states, not just the border states, but a place like Iowa. This is really impacting the entire nation.
It is absolutely a crisis. The Biden administration has an open border agenda, and our borders are wide open. The northern border has long been physically wide open. The southern border now, through policy and operations, is open as well. And you're right that since May, particularly May 11th, this has kind of faded as an issue in the news. And that's by design by the Biden administration. They are playing a deceitful shell game and claiming that the border has gotten better, that numbers of illegal aliens crossing have gone down. But what they've really been doing is telling future illegal aliens, stop crossing between the ports of entry on the southern border. And instead, here's a handy CBP Mobile One application you can put on your phone, use it, make an appointment, go to a port of entry, whether that is on the southern border as a land port or fly into the interior of the U.S. at an airport. And you will be paroled into the U.S., which is a temporary category we can talk about more. You'll get work authorization, and here's a court date if you want to see an immigration judge, but we're not going to follow up really. And so those numbers of people crossing at the ports per this new direction have rapidly and steadily risen. And so what the administration is doing is saying, Americans, look over at our numbers of people between the ports. Look, they're down. We've solved this problem. Nothing to see here. They don't want you looking at the sudden increase of aliens entering through ports, but they are still inadmissible, which is a legal term of art. Immigration is needlessly confusing. But nonetheless, Customs and Border Protection reports these numbers, and they are not here lawfully. So We keep trying to remind people and educate people that the shell game is going on and to not believe this administration. But sadly, too many of the media and even members of Congress are buying this line that, oh, things are improving, but it's really not.
Well, and just to put this in perspective for us, I haven't seen the latest numbers, but I know of the last several months, we're not just talking about a few people here and there. That's why we have to, I believe, have to sound this alarm bell. The situation is dire because you're talking about literally millions of, not hyperbolically, this is millions of people pouring over the southern border. And the fact that they're now, not only do they, have to find a spot in the dead of night through the fence, as it were, but now they're being welcomed in with open arms, aren't they?
Yes, and worse, Secretary Mayorkas of Homeland Security calls this a lawful pathway. So really what he's seeking to do is to legalize illegal immigration. And all in the name of just trying to get as many people into the U.S. as fast as possible during this administration, and to really blur the lines between legal and illegal immigration, to play these word games to make it sound lawful and therefore good. We just need to keep reminding Americans that no, that is not what's going on. This is still illegal immigration. And why should folks in the Midwest care? Because all of these millions, as you properly say, are going to every district in the country. At Heritage, we did a bit of a pilot for about a month, just over a year ago. We used anonymized phone data, mobile phone data, and we picked 30 known NGOs or non-governmental organizations along the southern border and tracked the phone data through those NGOs to see where the phones ended up over 1 month period. So we found about 30,000 phone devices went to every single congressional district in at least the mainland US over just 30 days. So truly, these masses are coming to every city and every community.
I just have to process what you just said. We're talking about millions of people who are entering the country illegally, perhaps through a port of entry. So we're recognizing them. And oftentimes they either have phones or are given phones. Now they're connected with NGOs, so non-governmental organizations, but they have a connection with the government, right? These are groups that are there to help, conceivably, to help the immigrants as they come in, and oftentimes they're called refugees, right? So we definitely want to be sensitive to all of these different situations. Compassion gets activated, etc. Nothing wrong with that. However, they're now being bussed in and taken into many cities all throughout the interior. But interestingly enough, some of those places, Iowa being one of them, because we've seen and cataloged our friends over at the Iowa Standard, I recommend their work, because they have been tracking the flights that have landed in the middle of the night in airports in Iowa, and then people are deplaning, and we don't know where they're ending up after that. We kind of lose track of them, and maybe that's the point. And this is happening all across the country, and in particular, interestingly enough, Republican districts seem to be disproportionately the destinations. Is that correct?
I have not seen hard evidence that Republican states or localities are intentionally selected by NGOs or the government. Generally, immigrants get to choose where they want to go, and they naturally want to go where they have family already located or have a friend or know somebody. And so that's why you tend to get very large immigrant populations in always the same locations. New York, Florida, Illinois, Texas, California are always the leading states. But people are, as you said, flown everywhere or bussed everywhere, and settle everywhere. And the left is very good at using emotional tools to accomplish their open border agenda. You mentioned refugees. Yes, the media, the left, they refer to all of these people as quote unquote asylum seekers. even though most are not eligible for asylum, they're coming for economic reasons. And the administration has admitted that in public documents. Nonetheless, they keep up with the word games to play on heartstrings of Americans. The left also uses these NGOs, and many of them are faith-based organizations, which unfortunately now this is becoming a multi-billion-dollar industry. These organizations receive several large grants from the federal government to, quote, receive, process, and transport these aliens all over the country. And, traditionally, some of these organizations have been involved with kind of the more classic refugee process, which is someone is overseas, perhaps in a refugee camp, not necessarily. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees may refer an applicant to the Department of Homeland Security to interview and decide if they meet the standards to be a refugee. And then once that case is granted, what used to be called a voluntary agency, or VOLAG, now they're called NGOs, would get involved, help them get transported to the US, help them resettle, find their first job, their first apartment, and then they'd be on their way and the NGO would step out of it. That's very different from what's happening now, where we have these NGOs clear down south of Panama, all the way north at our border and throughout the US, helping them get to our border, cross our border, and then transport them all over the US. And unfortunately, when you call out some of these faith organizations, it's Catholic Charities, it's Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services, it's HIAS, it's World Church Services, there are many. Mm-hmm. Then if you call them out on this, then they accuse you of being inhumane, non-Christian, not willing to help the stranger. They'll quote Bible verses, etc. But truly, this is about smuggling, and this is far afield from the classic refugee process that they used to be involved in.
Lora, I think you're just making an incredible point that I'd love to unpack. We're going to take a quick break and we'll come back to right here, right, with Lora Ries making an excellent point. I'd like to address the morality of illegal immigration and open borders, and why, especially from a faith perspective, because that's where I live, that's my neighborhood. And I want to be consistent. I want to show love and kindness and compassion. But why is it that an open border is not compassionate? You said the word smuggling. I mean, that's a huge difference compared to a lot of the Christian voices on immigration. Let's talk about this and what might be a better path forward with Lora Ries, expert on immigration with the Heritage Foundation. And they're just unfailingly excellent as a think tank and a resource center for all sorts of policies. And it's, I think, high past time that the church come to terms with what's happening on our borders with illegal immigration, and what would Jesus do in terms of immigration, and what is good, compassionate, and constitutional policy on this. We'll pick her brain a little bit more on this when we return. You're listening to FaithWorks Live. In today's world, security has never been more vital. And at FaithWorks Live, we're proud to partner with VeriGuard Security. It's a professional physical security service, and they're really raising the bar in security and private investigations. Whether you need a team of professional officers to protect what you have worked hard to build, or their mobile security units for multiple properties or large locations, from business or corporate properties to your home or neighborhood. Perhaps you've got an event coming up. They secure quality security coverage for events large and small, because it's about peace of mind and protecting you, your family, your team, and your property. Settle for nothing less than the best when it comes to your security. You shouldn't have to compromise. When it comes to security, you can trust VeriGuard. Contact them today at veriguard.us. That's VARA guard.us. For security service, you can trust VeriGuard.
Elwood, have you seen the cake I brought this morning?
Was it Dutch chocolate?
You're eating my cake?
Yes, sir.
Excellent cake, sir. Would you like a piece? There's one left.
That cake was for the auction! You are in so much trouble, young man!
Trouble? Oh, no, sir, not at all. You see, Marvin and Bob also ate a piece, so because we all ate a piece, no one's in trouble. It's like speeding on the highway. Everyone does it, so it's okay. See? Are you sure you don't want a piece?
What?
Okay, it's clear you don't understand how this works. Obviously, if one of us had not eaten a piece of cake, then clearly the rest of us would be in trouble. But because all of us decided to have a piece, then none of us are in trouble. See?
We all know that there are things that are right and things that are wrong, regardless of what the majority does. If it means going against the crowd, will you do the right thing?
Hey, Elwood, where's your office now?
Men's room, middle stall.
Another message from Lifeline Productions, the comic strip of radio, at lifelinepro.com.
Hey, what's for dinner? If you're like me, I hear that 15 times a day. And fortunately, I have a plan. It's typically Anonymous beef at our house. We are such big fans of Anonymous beef at the Haynie home because it's just great quality beef. There's no steroids or antibiotics. It's naturally raised butcher beef. They sell by the quarter, the half, or the whole, and they support your local meat lockers so they can help you get it processed in a way that works for you. In this economy, it's good to have affordable options for your meat. And if you're willing to make a good investment in your nutrition for a healthy menu plan, I highly recommend Anonymous Beef. Contact Dave and Mary Lynn at anonymousbeef.com. They welcome your questions. They'll help get you on the schedule. They have locker dates coming up. Don't wait. Secure your locker date today. Go to anonymousbeef.com. That's OHNEMUS beef.com.
Hey, neighbor, beautiful day, isn't it?
Yeah. Hey, I wanted to talk to you about this fence. Remember, we both agreed to pay half.
Bob, instead of reimbursing you, I've decided to become a really good person.
What?
Hey, what's better, getting paid for half a fence or living next door to a great neighbor?
But we had an agreement, and you're not paying me. That's a bad thing.
But I don't do bad things. I'm a good person. Why, I've been doing nothing but good things for a whole year. In fact, the most recent polls show that 99 out of 100 people like me. Doesn't that prove I'm good?
Look, if you're not going to pay me, you could at least admit you wronged me. I'm willing to forgive you, but help me here.
Why do I need your forgiveness? Everybody loves me.
Well, 99 out of 100 anyway.
The Bible declares that because we have sinned, we have wronged God, and any attempt at us being good is fruitless until we first ask God for His forgiveness. Have you asked? Another message from Lifeline Productions, located on the web at lifelinepro.com.
I'm so glad you're with us. We are excited to talk with Lora Ries today. She is an expert on immigration and border security policy with the Heritage Foundation. And I highly recommend all of their work at heritage.org. Great group of folks over there that'll help you think deeply about issues that matter quite a bit to our country. And we haven't been talking, I think, about immigration nearly enough, considering the crisis that's going on at our southern border. And Lora, you just mentioned right before the break that this is a serious moral issue as well, that many times, and I think this is one of those moral issues that the church is very divided on. Lots of times we talk about abortion and pro-life here on this show. We're very committed and passionate about that. The vast majority of Christians are pretty solidly united on what it means to be pro-life and what we're fighting for in that realm. But on the issue of immigration, it's a very different thing. I think we are called, obviously, to be compassionate, to welcome the stranger and the sojourner in our land. But does that equate to having essentially a wide open border where we don't know who's coming in? We don't know how they're being treated. These people disappear, for various purposes. There's not great information on who they are. And the potential for fraud, the potential for abuse seems massive to me. But I think we're conflicted on this issue. So I'd love for you to lend some of your insights on why what we have going on right now is not Christian or compassionate, and what we might be able to do instead. So I know that's a big question, but would you mind letting us know why an open border is not compassionate?
So principle number one is we should have a lawful, orderly, and manageable immigration system. And when it comes to refugee protection, there are benefits to continuing to conduct that process in the classic sense, which was as I described before. You're starting overseas. They might be in a refugee camp, or they might just be displaced into another country in the region. But conducting the interview and the vetting there is beneficial because you are more able to get information on the person, either verifying their identity, do they have a criminal or terrorist background, any other intel community vetting and criminal vetting can more easily be done in their country or region. Once they are at our doorstep, we lose a lot of that advantage. Secondly, the refugee process has an annual ceiling, and this goes to that manageable notion that I mentioned a moment ago. And it needs to be good for the U.S. and in America's interest. We have, since our very beginning, welcomed those who have been persecuted by their government, on account of their race, religion, their nationality, political opinion. But we've gone really far afield from that. And so it's important that we are bringing in legitimate refugees into the U.S., not watering down the standards to hit some higher arbitrary number in a year to virtue signal. That renders the benefit, and I view it as the second most important immigration benefit we give after U.S. citizenship. It renders it meaningless. We don't recognize it anymore. So that's the type of classic example that we need to stick with. Unfortunately, right now, the left is drawing or enticing migrants from all over the world to come to our southern border and to apply for asylum. Asylum and refugee is no different in what they must prove. The elements are the same. It's that persecution on account of one of those grounds I mentioned. The difference is just where the person is located. Okay. And so the left is drawing them to our border, where we lose the vetting advantage, and there is no annual ceiling to asylum. And so we have lost control over who is coming, and knowing who they really are. And so that endangers Americans. And again, it is rendering this very important benefit unrecognizable. So from a moral standard, we need to get back to why do we give this benefit in the first place, is to help those who were truly persecuted, not just to bring in as many people as possible under the label of being an asylum seeker. It's not the same thing. And so when people are donating money to organizations involved in this, they need to be aware of, are they really helping persecuted people and persecuted populations? Lord knows there are plenty, unfortunately, of truly persecuted populations around the world. We need to be focusing on those where they are. We can help more people in their own region than to bring them to our border, and recommend, staying away from what's happening at and near our border, which really is smuggling.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit as well. Again, there are many things that I've not necessarily thought I would have to define in my day and age, like, the fact that men and women are different, and that's a good thing. Just simple things. I think the fact that borders are just a part of any country, we don't tend to have any confusion about this when it comes to other nations. Germany gets to determine their rules. Ukraine, any number of things, any number of countries. Zimbabwe can determine its borders and its border policy. But for some reason with America, we have some confusion about this. And that's just part of what a country is. And what a country does is to defend its people, defend its borders, and create that for general safety. And to have to define why that is important and why that is a quintessential quality of what a country and a government exists to do to keep their people safe. I never thought I'd have to have those arguments and those debates. And yet here we are. Surprise, surprise. So maybe we can go down that road for just a minute. Why is it that it's so important to defend our borders? And what are some of the vulnerabilities that we now have? I would say, obviously, for American citizens whose voices are often lost in this debate about compassion and care. What about the safety of American citizens who live on the border and now, even further in country now? But not just for their security, but also for the safety of the people who are being led in and often trafficked in.
Right. Yeah, no border, no country. And as you said, every other country seems to have a border and be able to uphold their laws to represent that border. And yet, the US we're bad for doing so somehow. What's happening with this open border is not just the millions that you had referenced who are crossing illegally and being encountered by either Border Patrol or Customs and Border Protection, but we also have at least 1.6 million known gotaways. These were people who were seen on a camera and border agents couldn't get to, for example. And when you can simply turn yourself into Border Patrol and get an airplane ticket to anywhere you want to go in the US, why would 1.6 million people avoid that and evade border agents? Well, it's because they either have past criminal convictions, or they're transporting drugs across the border, or they are a known or suspected terrorist in most cases, or some combination thereof. So this is truly a national security threat. The border agents they do report how many aliens they encounter on the terrorist data watch list. And unfortunately, under this administration, they've hit a record high with that, like they have with so many other aspects of the open border. So fentanyl that's crossing, for example, those are precursor chemicals coming from China. They're shipped to Mexico. That's manufactured in these makeshift labs in Mexico and then brought into the US. And that too, another record number of deaths from fentanyl poisoning. And in many cases, people have no idea that they are taking fentanyl. They think that they are taking another medication or a drug, and fentanyl is laced in it, and they wind up being dead. So over 100,000 Americans died last year from drug overdoses. 70,000 of those were fentanyl related, particularly young people. The migrants themselves are endangered. So the cartels have operational control of our border. No one's crossing it without going through those cartels. And these are the most ruthless people on the planet. They are in it for money, whether they are trafficking drugs, people, or both. Sex trafficking, women, children, frequently raped along the journey. If people have not seen the movie that just came out, Sound of Freedom, I highly recommend it. It is about sex trafficking of children. And so it's bad for Americans, and it's bad for the migrants themselves, these open borders.
Yeah, highly endorse the Sound of Freedom as well. I can't believe the backlash that a movie like this has been getting. I guess that's a topic for another day. I don't understand why not every single American couldn't come out and see this movie and support the mission to shed light on human trafficking. I guess it was politically inconvenient, but that's my tinfoil hat over here on the side. Highly recommend The Sound of Freedom. As you said, Lora, the human cost, the human toll to failing to secure our borders leaves every single person vulnerable that's in the entire situation. So I guess I've got maybe an inconvenient but obvious question: is why? Why are we doing this? What you mentioned, that this is not by accident. This isn't just a massive incompetence, tenfold every single day. That this seems to be orchestrated and intentional. So why would we be allowing and encouraging this at the highest levels of our government?
It boils down to power, politics. For some, they truly believe in a globalist approach and open borders, no matter what the country is, and that anyone should be able to travel anywhere they want to, unencumbered. For others, it comes down to power. Some view these masses of populations as future voters for their party. The left has succeeded in keeping off of the US Census a question on citizenship. And so the result of that is that US citizens and lawful immigrants, temporary visitors, and illegal aliens are all not only counted in the US Census, but then those numbers are used for congressional apportionment. And so congressional districts are drawn based on those numbers. So we've got congressional districts in California, for example, that shouldn't exist. If you were to exclude all non-US citizens, congressional districts would look very different. And some states would have more districts and other states would have less. And that's about power. So, a variety of reasons why this is happening. But that's generally what it boils down to. One other aspect we haven't really touched on, and that's the unaccompanied minors.
Yes, let's please go into that. That's huge.
Another record for the Biden administration. Hundreds of thousands of unaccompanied children have crossed the border. And the left has designed it this way. There was a pair of bills that Senator Dianne Feinstein from California and Representative Zoe Lofgren, also from California, introduced back in 2001, called the Unaccompanied Alien Child Protection Act. And I was working on the Hill at the time, and I had to manage the bill. And when I read it, I thought, all this is going to do is encourage more parents to send their kids unaccompanied across the border, because it would give them all kinds of benefits, immigration benefits included. And so clearly parents would use this to get a child across the border into the US and then gain a foothold here to then eventually have family join them in the US and start chain migration. So they kept reintroducing these bills every Congress because they weren't passing until 2008 in a Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act, which is considered a quote unquote must pass bill. This unaccompanied bill was folded into it. Sure enough, it passed. And from 2008 onward, the number of unaccompanied children has just skyrocketed. Predictable. And this is a major pipeline for child trafficking, sex trafficking, and now we're seeing child labor violations as well. New York Times has put out a series of articles on this very issue. Health and Human Services, which is responsible for providing housing for unaccompanied children, has lost at least 85,000 kids. That's prime for sex trafficking of children. And soon members of Congress will say, well, we need to give these populations, quote unquote, dreamers, green cards because they came in as children. Yes, that's how the left has designed it. So they've literally built an immigration system on the backs of children. They're exploiting children. But if you call them out for it, then they'll accuse you of not wanting to help children and painting you as the immoral person. So it's long time that Americans, members of Congress, call out these policies, the groups that perpetuate it, that make money off of this, that try and protect that money, even if it's, Catholic Charities, even if they get a call from the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, which members of Congress do, because all these organizations have lobbyists, and to stop this pipeline of unaccompanied children.
I know that sometimes those stories paint a picture better than all of these numbers. You get caught up in the millions upon millions numbers, and it seems just too big. It seems an overwhelming number. So I wonder if there's a story that sticks out in your head of why this is important, why this is something that really needs to be addressed. You've mentioned, obviously, I don't know who could hear the stories of children being exploited and children being trafficked like commodities and put in danger, and parents maybe that are so desperate that they might trust a stranger, trust a gang leader to try and maybe send their child over, and that has disastrous consequences, I can only imagine. But I wonder if you're aware of a story or two that you might be willing to share with us about why this matters.
Well, again, I'd go back to the movie that we mentioned, Sound of Freedom, because it portrays this issue in a few different ways. Some of these kids are lured into what they believe is going to be the modeling industry. Some kids are just snatched right off the street. Some are brought across the border with adults. Maybe they're trying to pose as a family, because the smugglers, the cartels know that it's easier to cross the border as a family. There have been a lot of fake families detected when border agents conduct DNA tests on suspected fake families. Children are recycled for this very purpose, to more easily get across the border. And then the vast majority of them never leave the country. And so it's unfortunately, kids are used as tools to get into the U.S., to stay as long as possible, and to defend against deportation.
What can we do instead? That's always my question. I know this is a huge topic, but what might be a good constitutional policy instead? Again, we care about being compassionate, but we can't do a country like this. You said no border, no country. We can't leave open these vulnerabilities for not only our national security, but also for the migrants themselves. So what would you recommend? Where would you recommend we start instead?
Well, one simple thing is to enforce the laws that are already on the books. This administration is ignoring and violating a lot of the laws. They're refusing to enforce our immigration laws. That would go a long way. Second is closing some of these loopholes. So right now, unaccompanied children from Canada and Mexico are returned to those countries, whereas unaccompanied children from any other nation are brought into the U.S. They get to stay here and seek a benefit. So that disparity, that loophole needs to be closed. Also, there is a term called catch and release, where even if they are initially put into immigration detention, a single judge in California has decided that you can't detain anyone in an immigration setting for more than 20 days. So immigrants know that if they just wait 20 days, they'll be released into the U.S. That detention finding needs to be changed as well. Frankly, I think that whole Unaccompanied Alien Protection Act that I talked about by Senator Feinstein and Representative Lofgren, that needs to be repealed. It has only created a pipeline of unaccompanied children, and it entices more of that. Also among them are gang members, MS-13, for example. A lot of gang members are teenagers, so they can be an unaccompanied minor, and that is in fact how they cross. And then, here in the U.S., they commit very violent crimes against fellow migrants or American citizens as well. So enforcing our laws, closing those loopholes. There are other things that need to be done. We could get into chain migration.
So what's that? I assume that has to do with, I will not assume. I will ask the question. I'll be educated. Laura, what is chain migration and why does it matter?
So chain migration on our legal side of the equation, we provide green cards on a family basis for many relative types, for not only relatives of U.S. citizens, but also relatives of other green card holders. And so it once one person is here, then they can petition to bring their family members in. And then once they are here, they petition to bring their family members in, and so on and so on. So we have advocated that in terms of family-based immigration visas, that we get back to the nuclear family, focus on a spouse and minor unmarried children for that type of green card. Also part of this is what's called birthright citizenship, which is an erroneous interpretation of the 14th Amendment. And that interpretation currently is that if you are born here, no matter if both your parents are illegal aliens, you get U.S. citizenship the moment you're born, even though you have zero ties to this country. That is not the way the majority of countries in the world provide citizenship. Usually it is based on at least one of the parents, their nationality. And so an entire industry has cropped up where pregnant women will time it so that they get into the US about the time they're ready to give birth, knowing that that child will be a US citizen. And then if the parent is ever put into removal proceedings, then they'll argue, well, you can't deport me because I have a US citizen child.
And what's striking me over and over in this conversation is that people oftentimes confuse a lack of boundaries with love, that we can just let one another do whatever. And if I, dare to judge you or tell you no, that means I don't love you. So of course, the loving thing to do is just let people do whatever they want. And there's no consequences. And, far be it for me to ever tell you no. As a parent of little ones, of both toddlers and teenagers, I know that the word no is not popular, but it is love. And I mean, not to oversimplify the discussion, but we have to have boundaries. I think love puts boundaries around the things that are most important they need to protect. And if we care about our country and we care about the people who are in danger, we need to have a good orderly system. We need to have ways that we can know who needs our help and to do so efficiently and in a proper orderly way, as well as the people that are trying to exploit the holes that are in our system. Because largely, I mean, this has been a problem that has gone unchecked. We've talked a lot about the left using immigration for, more nefarious purposes, but Republicans have turned a blind eye to this for a long time as well. This has been going on, I know, longer than I've been alive, and we have allowed various interests to encourage us to just look the other way and say it doesn't really matter if we enforce the laws as long as the outcome works for me here and now. And we're paying that price now in the cost of human lives, not to mention, the other resource costs of tolls on the taxpayers and, the strain on our social safety nets and, it just any number of costs that I'm most concerned about the human toll that this has ensued because we've not enforced the laws up to this point.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Oh, I'm not sure that's true because you're the expert around here. Lora Ries has been our esteemed guest from the Heritage Foundation. She is one of their top-notch immigration and border security experts, has many years in the field and counseling. And Lora, again, this feels like such a big problem. And we're in the first in the nation caucus state. So I think one way that just as I'm, brainstorming here, we can bring up these questions to the candidates as they're on the stump and they're on the trail to get their serious answers to plans as to how they can start writing this crisis. What would be some things that we might be able to ask and some things that we can advocate for in a state like Iowa, perhaps, again, not a border state, but a state that has an outsized influence on the leadership of this upcoming election?
So if we are going to enforce the laws, we have to apply consequences. It's kind of like that tough love that you talked about. And so one question for candidates is, what consequences are you willing to put into place? And this happened during the Trump administration. There was a surge. We had caravans of illegal aliens coming across the border. And once consequences were applied, once they were told, no, you can apply for asylum, but you're going to wait in Mexico while your application is pending, those caravans stopped coming. And once people were returned, if someone applied for asylum, but they were from, say, El Salvador, and they crossed through Mexico or Guatemala, and they hadn't applied for asylum there, once we returned them to that first safe country and said, if you want to apply for asylum, apply for it there, they stopped coming. And so not only does that mean pushing our borders out, but it also means interior enforcement. And this is the part of the equation that never gets discussed enough. Everyone's willing to give more resources to Border Patrol and more agents. No one ever talks about giving more resources to ICE, which is in charge of interior enforcement. There are, as we said, millions of illegal aliens that have been let in just under the Biden administration. Are these candidates willing to give the resources to ICE to go find these people, detain them until they are removed? And that takes a stiff spine, serious will, and it's a political risk for some. So that's probably the most difficult question for any candidate.
Well, and I know there have been some attempts on the part of some Republicans, and they'll say, well, we need to legalize. We need to work at legalizing the illegal immigrants that are here. You mentioned the Dreamers Act and things like that. There has been some bipartisan support for something like that. I wonder what solution you think is most constitutional for dealing with the people who are here illegally or whose families emigrated illegally, and now they have children that have been, raised their entire lives in the United States and find themselves in that situation. What would be your suggestion for dealing with that?
So amnesty of any type it's bad policy because it just perpetuates more illegal immigration. It just tells future illegal aliens, if I could just get into the US and bide my time, I eventually also will get an amnesty, which is a green card. And then we never get out of this cycle. And so this goes back to the point I made earlier about the kids, the population that the left always, and the right, whenever we're talking about an amnesty and what do you do with those people who came here as children or know no other country, they always focus on the kids. And so, yesterday's unaccompanied child are today's dreamers. And this has been going on now for 23 years. So, how do we get out of this cycle? I think at the very least, we could start with what I call the Biden population. So going back to when he came into office, starting with that group, locating them, and then removing them. There is currently in the immigration law this backwards benefit that says, if you've been here illegally for at least 10 years, you have good moral character, and certain family members would experience exceptional and undue hardship. If you were deported, then you get a green card. And so it's built on this notion of if you stay here illegally long enough, you'll get a reward. That's backwards. So we don't want to encourage more of that. And yet that's what we keep hearing from members of Congress.
Yeah, you're right. It does seem backwards. And I think that a just law is one that applies to everybody. We care about justice and mercy. And so to have that I think that rule that needs to be enforced well. And if you're, if the laws that are on the books are not working, although I would agree, we need to enforce the laws that we have first. Like, let's try that. Let's just start there and see what a difference that might make. It's a good place to start. But we can also address this, again, legally. What we can't allow to happen is the situation where illegal immigration specifically, is going on unchecked. And you've got the floodgates have been opened. This is dangerous for every single person involved. It is not compassionate. It's leaving the most vulnerable people unprotected from the most predatory forces on this earth. And I think we absolutely have to address it. And I don't think it can be just slogans either. I hear some slogans sometimes that say, oh, just build the wall, again, that's maybe a good suggestion. That's a good place to start. But still, I think we have to go a little bit deeper as you're advocating, Lora. And I appreciate you giving us, equipping us to have these conversations from a consistent and constitutional and conservative and compassionate point of view.
Well, happy to do it. Thank you for having me on.
Lora Ries is our excellent guest. Check out more of her work at heritage.org. I'll link to her bio below so you can see more of what she's regularly writing topics or on this topic specifically. So I'll put a link to her most recent piece in the podcast. Check that out. Pass it on to a friend. If you're interested in engaging more on this topic and in other topics as well, I'm serious, and I take seriously, as I know many Iowans do, our first in the nation status. We have the opportunity to vet a lot of these candidates and figure out where they stand on all of these things, who will be the best leaders for our country moving forward, who will cast that new vision, and who has the plan and the policies to back it up. So immigration should definitely be front and center in our questioning as we consider who should be the next occupant of the White House and the next leader for our nation. So with all of that said, I'm so glad that you've chosen to join us. Again, pass this on to a friend. Let us know what you think. If you agree, disagree, I'll take it all. Check out FaithWorks Live on Facebook, on YouTube if we haven't been canceled yet. And until next time, we have a mission. So let's be about it. That mission is to love God, serve people, and live free.
Hello, this is Heaven. May I help you?
Yeah, I think I found a flaw in your manual.
You mean the Bible?
Yes. You know that section that says, "So in everything, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you"?
Matthew chapter 7, verse 12?
Sure. Now, when you say everything, does that mean everything, or are there exceptions?
What is it about the word everything that you don't understand, sir?
Well, I have this really obnoxious brother-in-law, and I would love to just take some chicken feathers and some hot chocolate syrup and...
Sir?
Oh, I'm sorry. Surely there's got to be an exception to that rule.
Trust me, sir.
How about a loophole?
There's a very good reason why there's no exception in that section.
I don't think whoever wrote that ever met my brother-in-law.
Regardless, sir, that section is a part of God's standard for how we are to treat others. We can't apply His standard only when it's convenient.
It's easy to think our circumstances are unusual, but are you willing to obey God even when it's tough? Another message from Lifeline Productions, the comic strip of radio, at lifelinepro.com.
When a woman faces an unplanned pregnancy, every possible emotion goes through her head. Where can she go for help and for hope? She can go to Intervisions. Here in our metro, we have 2 healthcare clinics where she will find hope and help. From free pregnancy testing and STD testing to free ultrasounds, Intervision serves women and men with STDs who find themselves in vulnerable situations. They're completely free of charge because of generous donations from folks like you. And their medical clinics help their patients get all the information that they deserve that empowers them to make life-affirming decisions. That's what they do at Intervisions Healthcare Clinics right here in Des Moines. Learn more at intervisionshealthcare.org. That's intervisionshealthcare.org. And you can call 24 hours a day at 515-440-CARE. That's 515-440-2273.
Hey, I hear you won the chance to have God answer any question you ask.
Yes, I did.
What are you going to ask?
Why do your shoestrings only break when you're in a hurry? You know how that is. You're late for an interview.
Wait, that's it?
Yeah.
You can ask God anything. Why don't you ask Him something profound, like, what's the meaning of life?
I thought about that, but that was answered through King Solomon in the Bible.
Oh, well then how about, why do bad things happen to good people?
The book of Job answers that. I wanted to ask something the Bible doesn't address.
What about, what does God want you to do?
The book of John, chapter 6. I tell you, with all the answers the Bible has, reading it is like having God right there in your living room. The thing I didn't see addressed was shoestrings.
Oh, okay. By the way, stressful situations cause you to use excessive force. Thus, you break your shoestrings.
Fine. Now I have to come up with another question.
Another message from Lifeline Productions, the comic strip of radio, at lifelinepro.com.
There's no better time than now to stand for life. And you can stand with Iowa's original pro-life organization, Pulse for Life. They're the longest standing nonprofit pro-life organization in Iowa, and they're dedicated to informing, educating, and inspiring a new generation to value the sanctity of all human life, from fertilization until natural death. They serve at the State House. They educate in classrooms, at events. They proudly serve on the coalition of pro-life leaders. They are on the front lines of the battle against this throwaway culture of death that we see all around us, and we are winning ground. Hearts and minds are changing, and the pro-life movement is continuing to grow. And you can be a part of the exciting things that are happening right here in our own backyard at pulseforlife.org, and get your finger on the pro-life pulse. Sign up for their newsletter, find ways that you can make a difference, and how you can change hearts and minds with their pro-life apologetics course, pulseforlife.org.
Your beacon, Iowa's Hope 940.